What's up, guys, and welcome back to Why Will Friends English.
Today we've got part 2 of your Phrasal Verbs of Education video, and today we're going to talk about phrasal verbs that have to do with taking a test or writing a paper, or ways that we would describe if things don't go the way that we want them to.
Yeah, so like she said, this is part 2, so if you're looking for part 1, you can click the link above, and then you can go back and listen to that. There's a conversation for that one. The conversation for this video is going to come out later this week.
Yep.
So let's get to it.
Alright, the first set what we're going to talk about is taking a test, because this is the one that everybody seems to remember. I think it's either this one and the stress associated with it, or writing the paper. I think of writing the papers.
I think the idea with taking tests and why they are so important and they are so stressful is because so much of your grade is squished down to a small section of time.
An hour of your time.
As opposed to like writing an essay or writing a large paper that could take hours and hours and hours, but you also have all that time to prepare. For a test, it's like, you hit it and it's done.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I found tests easier though, because it was so short. Whereas the papers was a huge, long process. And if I had other papers due at the same time, or I had other things that took a lot of time, like work, then it was more difficult to find time to arrange for the paper. So I don't know. I felt more stressed out about the papers than I did the tests.
One of the most useful skills for taking a test is to be able to narrow down the possible correct answers.
So when I think of narrowing down for a test, I think of taking all my notes and making them into a study guide that makes sense. And condensing down or to narrow down what I need to memorize or remember for the exam day. But you're saying for narrowing down like the choices to what's definitely not true to what's probably the case or probably the answer to the question. So by question, which, you could say narrow down that way too. Yeah.
Another thing that you have to do is you have to sort through your notes, especially my notes. When I would take notes, if you guys watched the last video, I would take notes, stream of consciousness. Like if the teacher said it, I would have to sort through my notes before I took that big test.
That was a lot of work, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it helps me review.
So something that we say sometimes in a test, or the teacher will say at the end of the test, they'll say, time's up, turn in your papers, or pencils down. And so sometimes we had professors in university that would actually have like a timer that would count down to the end of the test. Yeah. And I don't know if that was better or worse, because definitely you see the time coming down. But I guess if you're doing well and you look up and you still have 45 minutes left, you've done half the test, that's pretty good. But yeah.
When I'm taking a test, I stress out about pacing myself. So I want to make sure that I can make it through the exam and get through all the questions. So what normally happens is like I fly through it and then I have still a lot of time left to be review. Should I say it this way or that way?
One thing that you do before a test is that you go over your notes, or you sort through your notes to condense them down, to narrow them down. So that's a great way to explain what you have to do to prepare and review for the test.
Yeah, not like go over, but like...
Yeah, to like put your eyes over the paper, the words on the paper, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know why we would say go over. But...
I don't know either. I had a professor in university that was really serious about writing out the answers with a pen, not a pencil, so that when you went back, you would have to scratch out or white out your mistake, and it was very obvious. And he would count off for it as well. Like, he noticed when you made a spelling error or a grammar mistake, and it was a history teacher, but he was like, if you make a mistake and you scratch it out, it's going to cost you points.
Wow. I'm sure just the sheer magnitude of what he saw scratched out probably annoyed him enough to make that happen.
Yeah.
In homeschool, it was just like, write it out and turn it in, or like send an email or type it into the computer, like fill in the blank box. So I didn't have that problem. There was spelling. You had to be exact for sure. And you had to have the right answer for the program to say like, yes, you've got this right.
So you didn't do a whole lot of like whiteout then?
I never used whiteout, even in university, because I didn't know what it was until I saw people using it. I was like, that would be cool if I ever needed to do it that way. That's why I used pencils, because I would rather erase it. So it's interesting because whiteout or scratch out has become so common in this context that it's actually become a noun, like a product that you use to white out a mistake that you made in pen.
Yeah. All right, so the next section is talking about writing a paper or writing an essay.
Which is my favorite part.
Yeah. There are so many papers that we had to do in university, and it's a big part because it takes so much time and research. And honestly, as a teacher, you can really tell when a student has actually tried to do their paper and not just skipped out on it, which is probably why it's a commonly used tool of a teacher.
Yeah, it's more difficult to fake it and to be convincing when you fake it. So the first thing you need to do when you have an essay given to you and you see the prompt, you need to write out an outline.
Yeah. So you have to have some sort of structure, organization, otherwise you're going to be chasing rabbits all over the place.
We'll say writing out for the computer or on a notepad, like physically writing, but you'll only say type out for a phone or a computer or a mobile device, like some kind of device.
Yeah.
So while you're writing out that outline, you're going to read up on what you need, the research, on the information, the sources that you need in order to write your essay.
Yeah, you got to get those things straight. Otherwise, you are going to be spending more time doing more research that you already did before just because you have to track down those things that you already looked up before. So after you typed out or typed up your paper, then the next stage is to print out your paper.
Which you might have a print card and go to the library for, or you might have your own if you're lucky.
Not all professors do this very much anymore because a lot of it is you turn it in, like we talked about before, online or on a school's website. If your professor asks you to hand in your paper, then you will go to a computer and you will print the paper out, and then you can hand the physical copy to the professor.
Which I think is really funny because there is a company called Turnitin.
Yeah.
That's what our professors used at our university. If they wanted the paper submitted online, then they would say, turn it in at Turnitin.
Yeah.
So let's say you get your outline down and you get the bulk of the information, but you're not quite at the minimum word count required for the essay. When you go back through the essay and you're adding information, adding details in order to add more words to your essay, we call that filling it out.
Yeah. Or if you're doing it in the wrong way, where you're trying to fill it out, but you're doing it with just adding a lot of fluff or meaningless words, you could say you can muddle that down by just adding less good stuff. You're not adding details, you're not adding information, you're not
adding value, you're just throwing stuff in there. We also call that fluff out.
Yeah, to fluff up or fluff out a paper. Fluff is not good. You don't want words that have no meaning. You want words that have good, meaty details, and then the teacher, the professor can say, wow, that was really good stuff. Yep.
The next section, we're going to talk about all the things that kind of might happen that won't go your way. How would we describe that with English phrasal verbs?
Yeah, there have been a few of those. The first one that we don't use as much here in America, but it's to mark down a student for bad work, for wrong answers, or for like my history professor that would mark down students for their spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes.
Or it could be something so far as there's just behavior misconduct in class, like they have bad behavior in class, they'll be marked down, points marked against them basically, but they'll be marked down for bad behavior in class.
Yeah.
So we use marked down a lot on the teacher side, but as for students, like, what did you mark me down for might be something that you can do if you notice like a teacher asks you something and then they write something after you answer.
Yeah.
You might say, what did you mark me down for? But it doesn't mean necessarily that they're marking you down for something negative, but it could just be like, hey, why did you write my name? All right, so the next one that we're going to talk about is fall behind. And to fall behind basically means that you are behind your classmates or behind where you should be.
Yeah, a lot of teachers will have a syllabus, and the syllabus has the schedule. They will say, do this, do this, do this. And if you get delayed, or if it takes you too long to do an assignment, or just life happens, then you might fall behind your fellow classmates, and then you have to catch up to your fellow classmates.
Yeah, we very much, the picture in our mind when we choose the prepositions for fall behind and catch up is that of a journey. Like you're walking or you're climbing or you're running, and we use these same words, these same phrasal verbs if you start to fall behind the group of runners in a race. Or if you start and you need to catch up, you need to speed up and catch up because you took a break for water or something. We use the very same phrasal verbs for that situation. So think of it more like a journey, if you will. Think of your education as a journey, and we will use that fall behind and catch up the same way.
Part of that is when you're trying to catch up on all the homework that you might have missed, you have to make it up. So sometimes life happens and you miss that test or you miss that assignment. And so then that assignment now becomes makeup, where you have to go backwards and do the same thing that everybody else did, but now you have to do it by yourself. Yeah. It's really hard while you're learning new stuff to also go back and do makeup work. Why teachers try not to do that as much as possible.
Right. Finally, last one. If things just are not going your way with a class, you can drop out of the class. Yep. Some people will say drop out also for just out of university altogether or high school altogether, and then that person becomes a dropout.
Right. So dropout has a lot of weight, a heavy weight to it, because it means that you had to give up.
Though dropout is the proper term to use, as a phrasal verb, like, yeah, I dropped out of that class, or I dropped out of university, or I dropped out of high school, it does carry a lot of weight to call someone a dropout.
Right. Yeah, that's extremely offensive, just because everybody understands that there was something that caused that person, whether that person's laziness or just life circumstances, to give up. And we really, really don't like that emotion of saying, I had to give up, or I was forced to give up, or I just failed and I couldn't keep going.
Yeah, the connotation tends to be they gave up. So if you say, like, yeah, he's a high school dropout, then it's kind of like saying he's a bum. But it is something you might hear somebody say, especially in movies. You might hear a lot of underdog stories saying, like, yep, he was a high school dropout, but he became the best football player for whatever reason.
Yeah. All right, guys. So those are our phrasal verbs of education part 2. As you notice, it's a smaller list. But watch out, later this week, we will post the conversation that is accompanied with this, where we talk about and use some of these phrasal verbs in context in a natural English conversation.
Yep, so we look forward to seeing you there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.